Lakers show up in Denver Tuesday night, understanding if they want any real chance of extending this series and possibly stealing it, you got to steal game two, right? Because inevitably you've got to win in Denver and you got to do it early. You're not going to win late in Denver in a game 5 or 7. And that's what they looked like to start this game. There was a sense of urgency, a desperateness. And I think what jumped out at me right away was the pace. Those outlet passes, pushing the pace. I think maybe shocked Denver. It almost reminded me when you're watching an MMA fight or a boxing fight, and one guy is known, they're going to be there in the 10th or 12th round or the 5th round. And then in the other guy, you're like, hey, he's pushing the pace early. Like, I don't know about that, right? And perhaps they had to pay the piper late in that game for coming out with that game plan of pushing the pace. But I think we got to start with Anthony Davis. It's funny because you hear from high-level athletes all the time, it's all mental. It's all mental. And I think what they're referring to is that's the separator at the pro level. Once you're dealing with pros and all these guys are super talented, the mental aspect is the great separator. Now, when it comes to AD, we focus so much on the physical, his durability, his health, but when he's in there, I think there is a mental issue that's not discussed enough, but we've discussed it here on this channel plenty. His competitive stamina. His competitive stamina is lacking. He'll have these phases where he looks absolutely dominant and then somehow he disappears. And in that second quarter in particular, that whole first half, he was dominant. What do you have? 24 points. And he was so confident. You saw when he was in the short roll, he was hopping on the catch. And when you hop on the catch, most of the time you're looking to shoot. It's an offensive, confident mindset. And he just looks so confident physically. And I was like, yeah, where has this been the entire Jokic matchup between these two? Like, you understand you're not going to be able to stop the MVP on the other end, but there's no reason why you can't give it back to him on offense, because there's such a discrepancy in athleticism. Jokic is a smart team defender, but AD can get what he wants when he wants, and he showed that in that first half. The other aspect of that first half was D'Angelo Russell. I told you the law of averages. I knew he was going to shoot better in this one. I do think Denver, if I am a Nuggets fan, I'm a little concerned at the lackadaisical nature they came out with. In particular, Jamal Murray. He was responsible, I think, for letting D'Lo get going here. He kind of reminds me of Steph in that way defensively, where a lot of the time you're like, yeah, if we go and look at the tape the next day, you closed out. You put your hands up, like you made the rotation, but you didn't do it with any real like accountability or responsibility. You just kind of went through the motions. And so I thought he was kind of lackadaisical on both ends of the floor in the first half. And again, credit the Lakers for pushing the pace. And that's kind of what's so remarkable about this Nuggets team. When you look at that elite starting 5, you're only looking at 2 good defenders in KCP and AG, right? And the rest of them, it's a team concept. But they were a little lackadaisical against a desperate Lakers team who surprised them by pushing the pace. And then you had a dominant AD performance. And the others, if you want to just simplify things, Denver, what did they shoot? 8 of 34 from 3, 23% to the Lakers 43%. But watching it again this morning, there's a full breakdown of this game on my Patreon. Link is in the description. I think you have to credit the Lakers' effort defensively for a lot of those misses. You heard Reggie and Jay Craw keep referring to the ball going in and out. It almost looked like there was a reverse magnet on their rim there for a little bit. But if you go watch the second and third efforts from the Lakers defensively, contesting, I think had a lot to do with missing those shots. That said, good luck with Denver going 8 of 34 again in this series, LA. And I think that's part of what stings. And we'll get to the big picture here in a minute. The other part of this kind of vintage AD offensive performance in the first half was it allowed LeBron to dig in defensively. He was fronting Jokic at the post, jumping passing lanes, recovering. I don't know when's the last time I saw him spend that much energy defensively. And maybe that was just the game plan from the start, but it kind of felt like he looked at AD carrying the load offensively and was like, okay, I can spend a little more on this end, right? But we talked about it in yesterday's video. Denver has that true championship swagger where even if they're getting punched in the mouth at home, getting run off their own floor, down 20, there's no panic, right? They have an infinite confidence in their style of play. And I do think the Lakers wore out. I do think the pace of the first half maybe used a little more of the tank than they would have liked in that second half. But I'll tell you, I knew the moment the Lakers were in trouble last night. I think it was about 4 minutes to go in the third quarter. They kept running that side pick and roll, right, with AD and LeBron. But this time it was Reeves. Reeves skips it to AD. They had been in a scoring drought, mind you. The momentum had started to swing. He skips it to AD right at the nail, right in that sweet spot. He had hit 3 or 4 already yet. He skips it out of bounds to the weak side. Didn't even look at the rim. Didn't even look at the rim. And I was like, oh, there goes that competitive stamina again. Like, why? It was just one of those moments where it's like, oh, man, okay, here we go again with this. And so it gets tight, right? And then they're going back and forth there. And what do you know? The Lakers don't get the favorable whistle. I mean, they were dumbfounded. And hey, sometimes that's the way the cookie crumbles, right? At the same time, I don't blame LeBron and D'Lo and these guys and Ham for campaigning. Objectively speaking, I thought Denver got the favorable whistle, especially down the stretch where, when was it, Jamal turns the corner on the LeBron switch and it's just a touch bump foul, right? And then LeBron comes down and doesn't get the same call. D'Lo gets whacked, right? There was a lack of consistency with the whistle down the stretch. What I would say is, because there was so much controversy even in the Knicks-Sixers game, right, is the NBA, they did a really good job of speeding up these games in the last few seasons, right? In 2.5 hours instead of 3 and just making it a flow. You don't want to have all these stoppages. But that said, in the playoffs, I think most of us would rather have them get it right. Now, the question is, how do they do that? Do they go to an NFL type of system where under 2 minutes, they've got someone sitting there and they're like, hey, no, we need to look at this again? I was thinking about the idea of maybe the timeouts equate to the challenges in the second half. If you've got 3 second half timeouts, you can use all of them on challenges. And in the same system, if you win, you keep the timeout. That way, hey, down the stretch, if you got 2 timeouts and you want to use them and it's call, give them, the coaches, a little more freedom to try to correct some of these calls. But a lot of them were bang, bang. I don't think any of them were really egregious. This happens all the time. I think the shock was it went against the Lakers, right? Despite me bad-mouthing Jamal Murray in the first half. And I get it. Listen, his archetype of player is going to be a little helter-skelter. You have to take the good with the bad because ultimately it's worth it. And as he got going in that fourth quarter, it's like, oh, here they go, right? And in that final play with AD switching on him, Murray, his stop-and-go hezzy game is as tough to defend as any in this league because he takes and makes so many tough step backs. And he does it all over the floor. It's not just like one spot, one side of the floor where you're like, oh, he's getting to that. He'll do it any and everywhere. And so anytime he kind of squares up or just stops and hits a hezzy, the defender has to react to it. And that was the key to that game winner. He turns the corner on AD and he kind of squared him up and bursted downhill in a hesitation move. And that got AD moving urgently, backpedaling. And then it gave him the separation to bounce off that left foot. The rest is history. Now, clearly Jamal has the clutch gene. I don't want to take anything away from him. We've seen it over since Bubble Murray, right? It's just, I'm a believer in it. I don't know about y'all. Let me know in the comments. I want to hear a good argument on to why there's no such thing as a clutch gene in clutch shooting. I'd love to hear it. But either way, Jamal has the clutch gene. I do think there is an element of playing with Jokic. When you're looking at the offensive hub that he is and how many easy shots he gets their offense, I think that there are other players in Jamal's scenario where he's the number 2 scoring option and the scoring combo guard guy, where they don't have the legs Jamal necessarily has at the end of games because they're not playing with what's soon to be the 3-time MVP, right? That's just an advantage of it. He's got a little more juice in the legs, but I think it's also a credit to how many like all-time great combination two-man games have we seen where eventually it doesn't work, or it should work on paper, but personality-wise, it doesn't work because of credit being given and just different scenarios, right? And there's an element of chemistry where Jamal can have a terrible 3 quarters and Jokic is still going to give him the ball and live or die with him taking and making that shot. They're just a perfect fit chemistry-wise. And so they enhance each other. They enhance each other. And Denver, I saw someone on Twitter call it black magic, right? Like, I don't know what it is. It's championship swagger. It's championship juice, whatever you want to call it. I think that part of LeBron's complaining after the game and how mad he was is the fact that he understands the series is over. It kind of reminds me of that 2018 game 1 where he went crazy against the Warriors in the finals, right? And then the J.R. Smith incident. Not that he put up those type of numbers last night. He put up a hell of an effort defensively, right? But I think it's the same mindset of understanding we had to have that one. We had all hands on deck. All our others were shooting the seams off on the road. We had them on the ropes, up 20. We lose this one. Inevitably, we've lost the series. I think that LeBron knows that deep down inside, and that's why he was so demonstrative after the game. And look, LA, we can expect a heavy, favorable whistle in Los Angeles. They may even tie the series 2-2, but I think inevitably going back up into that altitude and playing this team with this confidence, you're up against it. You had to steal one, and they didn't get the one that they were supposed to steal. As far as the Knicks-Sixers series goes, I'm very curious about Jaylen Brunson here because I understand styles make fights, and stylistically, for whatever reason, Philadelphia gives Brunson trouble. You've got big Embiid in there, a lot of big wings, familiarity. I understand that, but I am curious to see, how this plays out. I'm assuming New York is going to advance in these playoffs. And as great of a regular season as Jaylen Brunson has had, and he has playoff success with Dallas, I understand that. But, true reputations of stars are made in the playoffs. And I'm wondering with the physicality and he's not getting that bumper car whistle, if what the narrative will be on Brunson when this season is over, because he's really struggling. But Josh Hart is not. Like Josh Hart, he might be the best value player in the league. What does he make? 12 or 15? Like he's a heck of a value. And they certainly don't have a championship swagger like Denver. How could they? But the Knicks definitely have some sort of swagger magic going on. Now, I thought Maxey got held. I did. It's neither here nor there at this point. I'm not here to argue about it. Did Nick Nurse get the timeout? I'll tell you what. If you go watch club basketball, AAU, or high school basketball, that is probably the most consistent issue or problem or complaint with the coaches. I didn't get the timeout, especially when it's a possession game. There's not jump balls. So a lot of the time it's like a tie up and they want the timeout and not the possession, or the other team's going to, and they don't get it. It's prevalent even at the grassroots level. Hard to say in that atmosphere in the Garden, but the Knicks stole it. And I just can't help but think about Embiid and his status here, where if they would have pulled that one off and it's 1-1 headed back to Philly, okay, fine. Maybe he toughs it out and tries to play. But at this point, at what point do you just sit Embiid? I get the idea of it's now or never for this iteration of the Sixers. But what is he, 28 years old? You're asking for it. He's out of shape. He's playing on one leg. You're asking for, knock on wood here, because I'm not asking for it, but you're asking for trouble rolling him out here in this physical, crazy series. All for what? You're down 2-0 and you're leaking oil. Kyle Lowry, what happened to Lowry at the end of that game? I don't know, man. It's been very entertaining, but I feel like we're kind of getting robbed out of a complete series here because I just don't know how much more Joel's going to play. Suns, Wolves tonight. I'm curious to see the adjustments. I'll be back tomorrow to talk about that one. Hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.